Okay,
Okay,
I'm ready.
Here we are. Here we go. So, do you do talks on concussions as well? Because I think I've seen like little bits and pieces of a few things. Are you doing research on concussions, or have you experienced some concussions yourself, or where's it coming
I
from?
have had major concussion 2 years ago, so which led me on an amazing journey of finding out what the true side effects, for want of a better word, are, or the damage that a concussion can do to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, which has led me on this journey and working with a neurologist here in Victoria, who is working to sort out my concussion issues. So, but leading on to that, there's nobody going out into the public arena to tell people what concussion is all about and what are the side effects and things like that. So one of my aims is to introduce the mind-body medicine and the Demartini way of actually helping the concussion, because that has been very transformational in working through my concussion issues. So next year we plan on doing sort of a tour and going out to a lot of groups and things like that to talk about concussion.
So not only the side effects of concussions, but also my question always is the purpose of the concussion or any issue, any situation, and like why are you experiencing it? What value are you getting out of it? Like, yeah, what is the purpose of it? And why is it that we create these experiences? So, yeah. And so when I think of like the mind-body connection, it always goes to what is the purpose of it? What value am I getting out of it? Because obviously we wouldn't experience anything if there wasn't some value for us to get out of it. It's just part of our path, part of our journey. And so if you start with the concussion, then you can actually lead into mission, vision, and purpose. Why are you here? Because obviously the concussion is helping guide you and lead you to an awareness of why you're here, because that's why you're experiencing it, is to get some value out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's interesting. So when I do the DM work on mind-body issues, I always start with, I mean, there's a purpose to it. So I always start with, how does it make you feel? What are you experiencing as a result of it? Because in order to do the DM, we have to have a starting point. So we have to have, it's always about facilitating self-love. So everything we experience is facilitating self-love. So I mean, I start with, that's the purpose of it. We're experiencing it in order to lead us to deeper levels of self-love. So yeah, that's what I always start with, is what value are you getting out of it? And I can just use you as an example because you've experienced it yourself, because so often people are asking, for somebody that they're working with, but when you've experienced it yourself, and then you can help other people understand the value of it and the purpose of it as well. So anyway, I always go to like, how does it make you feel experiencing the concussion?
Yeah, so you're asking me that question to answer?
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, look, having gone through what I've gone through, so if I took it from today, I have nothing but appreciation for going through the concussion that I went through, because it has made me delve more into mind-body medicine, in which I am really inspired to go out to the world and explore so many different avenues. And it's given me a closer relationship with a lot of professionals in the neurological industry, and actually have a little bit of standing in that community of what I've gone through, what I know on a body level. So sort of the dual teaching between them and myself, because I can actually verbalize what I feel, how it goes, what happens, and all those side effects, and can pinpoint which parts of the brain functioning correctly for them to work with that actually through the eye level. So they're working through the eyes to get to that part of the brain to click it on. So my journey in that respect has given me such vast knowledge that it, to me, is just priceless.
Education process for you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Little did you know what you wanted and needed to be educated on, and how you wanted to be educated, and what you wanted to know.
Well, at the time of the concussion, no.
Exactly. So, but I go back to the time of the concussion. When you first experienced the concussion, how did that make you feel?
How did the concussion make me feel? Well, I had quite severe side effects from the concussion at the time. So I was quite in a daze and quite in nowhere land, really.
In what?
In nowhere land. So it was just quite mind-numbingly foggy, trying to reorientate. But when I say that, it's like the process of the universe was restarted a start button. So it was like, reset, going on into a clean slate. And interestingly enough, my concussion actually happened on very deep water. So when I woke up out of my concussion, I actually couldn't feel any depth. So I was way out of my depth in sort of in the accident, but also at that time I was really out of depth in my life. So it just...
When you say out of depth, what do you mean? Do you mean that you like had no depth, or what do you mean out of depth in your life?
Out of depth. Well, I'd actually had 8 deaths in my family. So, and just going through all that process, and thank goodness for the DM method.
Yeah,
it was a really quite a trying time for me in that moment. So I literally was out of my depth trying to work my way through all of those goings on with all those.
Do you mean like you felt a bit out of control?
Absolutely. Well, not so much out of control. Well, maybe. Well, there's that maybe. But just not knowing how to deal with all of that, and also dealing with children and family members and extended family who were just going through utter despair, and working with all of them at the same time, and it was just sort of snowballing in, sort of imploding on me.
I was going to say, it sounds a bit like massive chaos.
Oh, it was massive chaos.
Yeah. So, and massive chaos is complete out of control.
Yes.
Yeah. I've experienced that I could think of or remember a couple of like slight concussions. One of them, I was in a car accident and I passed out. And then the other one was when I was young, I was in a skiing accident and I was out of control and I ran into a tree because I was out of control. And in the car accident, I wasn't driving and we spun out of control and we were going across a bridge and hit like ping pong pinball back and forth on the sides of the bridge. And so both experiences were a feeling of out of control. And then when I came to in the car accident, I couldn't speak properly, which is a feeling of not being able to control your words, not being able to control your language, your verbal communication skills. And so again, kind of like, not having control of my situation, not being able to, and I wasn't driving, so I couldn't control the environment. I couldn't control the person who was driving, even though I had said, you should slow down. He was uncomfortable with slowing down. So one of the big issues to me is like identifying a trait to deal with, to impact our physiology with the concussion is being out of control. And the way that you just described your life essentially felt out of control. So using that as a trait to own and value that part of us that's out of control, that feels out of control. Have you ever done that one?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah. So the way, again, that I do the DM on signs and symptoms is actually identify a trait that goes directly to the signs and symptoms that we're having. And feeling out of control is the result of experiencing the concussion. And we always experience things, again, to lead us to a path of deeper levels of self-love, because the more we love ourselves, the more we can love others, and the more others we love, the greater our capacity to serve. So it's an expansion process. And so, yeah, so going back to the whole being out of control, whenever I do the DM on signs and symptoms, it has a direct impact on dissolving and transforming that symptom that you're experiencing. Yeah. So like as an example, when I've like some of the quickest where you can see it transform instantly is when I was working with a client who had a fever and it made him feel exhausted. So we used exhausted as the trait. And then we do both the self and other, and it's side B because feeling out of control or being out of control is a negative trait. And so then it's doing the self form and the other form, and looking at where you've been out of control, where you've experienced out of controlness in your life, who sees you as being out of control, because typically we have shame and guilt associated with being this part of ourselves. So being exhausting to others, being out of control, being seen as out of control, being perceived as out of control, because we associate being out of control as a negative part of ourselves, is that, you know, we're valuable if we're in control or if we're controlling our lives or controlling our situations, but we're not valuable, which has a negative impact on our self-worth if we're not valuing that part of ourselves that's seen as out of control, or even when we feel out of control ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great depth of, I say depth because I was out of my depth, but a great depth of understanding of all of that.
And you can apply it to anything. So that's why even like, so I did P2 in 2010 in Johannesburg. And so, but I've done the work on my own with the signs and symptoms since 2006, 2007, and wanting to have a direct impact on the symptoms. And so then that way I can go to a client and go to a symptom directly, and you don't have to know anything about it. You can just simply go, so you don't even have to like make reference to the book or any book. You can just be like, okay, so what are you experiencing? Because it's your experience, it's your reality, and how is it making you feel? And it's the feeling that you're trying to get rid of, because it's some part of you that you haven't valued or loved or appreciated in yourself. And clearly, when we think of just the idea of appearing or being out of control, most people don't feel that's a valuable way to be. Yeah, most people think that, you know, oh, to be in control and to be organized and to be focused and stuff, that's the only way that you are of value. And so to go through and to see where you've been out of control in your life and where other people have seen you as out of control, because what's happened is you have developed a lot of shame and guilt associated with being out of control. And so you've repressed that part of you that sees value in being out of control. And this is why people medicate so many things, is because they don't see any value in it, as opposed to, and that's why, so going back to why do we attract the situations and the circumstances? Because we attract and co-create every experience we have. So it's like accidents. Why do we attract accidents? I was working with a client a couple of years ago who was in a relationship whose husband did not like her to be down and out, be blue, be depressed, be sad. And so she was taking antidepressants so that she could try to circumnavigate that. And so she wouldn't be down. And so what she would do is she would attract or co-create accidents to get injured, because that was socially acceptable to him. If she was down and out because she was physically injured, then he would take care of her and he would dote on her and he would spend time and attention on her. But if she was just feeling down for the day, he didn't want anything to do with her. So she figured out in her values a strategy to get the attention that she needed from him and to be able to experience being down and out without it being an emotional thing. So she transformed it into a physical thing. So she co-creates and attracts accidents to get injured. And so the same thing with the concussions is, why is it that we co-create or that we attract these situations, like in sports or whatever, accidents, car accidents, where we have an experience of the concussion, and what is it facilitating and leading us to do and become?
Yeah, that's a great insight, Lisa, because I was sort of trying to, even though I understood that on some level, I was getting caught up in, what was the meaning of concussion, and sort of trying to associate with that. So that's a great insight for me. Thank you in regards to concussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And so often, and that's where that's the path we're trying to go down, is understand the meaning of it, as opposed to why we co-create it, why we experience it. And from a big picture vision, from a God consciousness, why is this happening? Why are we experiencing this? Well, one, it's facilitating our journey.
Yeah.
It's facilitating our mission and purpose. There are no accidents. It's because it's helping us become who we want to be. It's leading us on a path or in a direction. It's also facilitating greater, deeper levels of self-love.
Yeah. No, I so understand that. So, yeah, which is quite interesting from my perspective. And it'll be interesting to be able to combine that into the lectures that we're going to be doing next year.
Absolutely.
To try and get people to recognize the bigger picture, other than, this is concussion, this is the side effects, this is what needs to be done.
Or this is, so often it's about, why did this happen to me? As if I'm the victim and it was an accident and there was no way that it was my fault, as opposed to flipping that around, which we all need to do. And we need to share this perception and this awareness that we need to flip it around and understand that we're not the victim of anything. We co-create every experience that we have, and every experience is valuable and unique to us and who we are, and it's facilitating us in our journey and becoming who we're capable of being. And so it's like starting out with just that basic concept of, okay, so first of all, you've experienced a concussion. You feel like that, this has happened to you, or this is an accident. And starting with that bigger picture vision of, there's no such thing as experiencing something that you weren't supposed to experience or that shouldn't have happened to you. And looking at it from a value perspective of, what value am I getting out of this? What value can I get out of it? And, asking the question, why did this happen to me? Not from the victim mentality, but from the expanding awareness and education awareness. So you can still ask that same question, but come from a different angle of, what is this helping me learn? Who is this helping me become?
Yeah. And it was interesting when you spoke about co-creation, because I had a chat with John Demartini when I obviously too in Houston this year in regards to concussion, and his comment was, where was the pride before the fall? Where was I really cocky just prior to the accident? And I completely denied that I was cocky before I got slammed. And then we found where I was just as cocky as the person who I sort of had that blame game happening of creating the accident. And when I found that, it's going, oh my God, I was just as cocky as what they were. And once I'd seen that and recognized that fact, sort of co-creating that whole thing between the two of us, then the shift was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yep. I had a conversation with a client just 2 days ago where his friend had gotten in a car accident, and they had been racing up into the car accident. And the gentleman that I was working with wasn't in the car accident, and he'd actually gone a different direction, and then he came around and ended up coming behind his friend that had been in the accident, who was pulled over to the side of the road. And my client thought, oh, he pulled over to wait for me. And he was pulled over because he had wrecked his car. And so then his friend said to him, well, this would have never happened had you not been with me and we not been racing. And my client looked at him and said, you and I both know why this happened. And I was with you to facilitate the experience of it happening. But the reason it happened is, how many times in the last year have you said to us, oh, I've never been in an accident. Oh, I'm a great driver. Oh, I don't get in accidents. And then his friend was like, yeah, I know. And so again, the pride before the fall, where was he cocky and bragging about having never experienced this, acting and feeling like that he was better than? And so, of course, again, this is a great point, that none of us are better than, and you can't love and serve people from a space of better than. It's to connect with people at a heart level, and we can only connect when we see them as a reflection of us. So why do we go through these experiences? To love ourselves at a deeper level, so that we can love that part of ourselves, which allows us to love that part in other people, because we can't love that part in other people that we haven't loved in ourselves. And so, like you being able to work with people who have experienced concussions, they have experienced the pride, they have experienced being out of control. You can connect with them on truly a healing consciousness level, because you've experienced that and you valued. So for you to work with people, one of the most valuable things that you can do is love that part of yourself, because that's what's going to allow you to connect with and love that part and facilitate the healing or the transformation in others who've gone through the same experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really relevant point, is to own where we're at and honor that part of ourselves, so that we can come up from a place of just pure universal guidance to help them love and own that part of themselves too.
And value that part of themselves. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not a matter of being better than, it's a matter of valuing the uniqueness of the expression of who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are all unique in our own way.
And that's what makes us valuable. Not that we're better than anybody else. The thing that makes us valuable is the uniqueness of our own expression. And so that way that we can all see everybody as equally valuable, because we're all just unique. And of course, it's a reflection of our values. And so some people appear differently because of their values, not because they're better or worse.
Yeah, and that you made a very valid point, is that we are all unique in our own set of values and in our own uniqueness. So to value that within everybody is just where it's at.
That's how we connect with people, is from a space of knowing who we are and knowing them as a reflection of us. And so, like, the word intimacy means to know one another. And so the more intimate and connected we are with ourselves, the more intimate and connected we can be with others. And to know ourselves is to value ourselves. And then that way we can value others as a reflection of us in our own unique expression of who we are.
Yeah. That's just perfect. Absolutely perfect. So yeah, and it's interesting how from one accident, whether you have concussion or whatever accident it is that you have, how that is life changing when we have a look at our own values and determine what it is, as you said, not from a victim point of view, but from what has that taught me today.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Who is it facilitated in me becoming? Because that's, I mean, in the end, it's all about us becoming the greatest, version of ourselves. So who is it helping me and facilitating me in becoming? And you're right, it doesn't matter what accident. And it's so interesting too, just like the idea of accident itself. You can then help people understand the value and purpose of accidents regardless of what they're from or, experiencing, because accidents are just simply experiencing an event.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that event is helping you become who you're capable of being.
Yeah, and that also goes back to with people with post-traumatic stress.
Absolutely.
The experience of the accident and how it has actually transformed their life.
Because that's what it's really all about, is the transformation. So every experience we go through is transforming us, and again, helping us become who we're capable of being. So yeah, it's the same idea and the same process of dealing with somebody with post-traumatic stress. Is what is it that you experienced in this situation, and how did it, like I always go back to, how did it make you feel? Because however it's making you feel, that's a part of you that you haven't loved and valued and appreciated in yourself. And then that's what pulls you out of the PTSD symptoms of feeling like that you can't perform and function at your highest levels. And typically what you find is that what created the PTSD experience is one of the things that I was going to say is, like, what's going on in the brain and what's the neurology of it. And typically it's helping us develop and transform our neurology, our brain. And so it's helping us be able to use and develop greater parts of our brain. So you'll find that people that have had some sort of an experience that resulted in like a PTSD experience, when they go in and start like exploring their brain, trying to heal their brain, it's a transformation process of the brain and developing other parts of our brain that are underdeveloped. So going through a traumatic brain injury, or going through a nervous breakdown, it's about breaking down a part of our system that can be healed and rebuilt stronger than it was before. Yeah. So it's probably the same experience that you're having experienced the concussion, is you're actually doing so much research and learning so much that you're developing a part of your brain that was underdeveloped, that had so much more capacity and potential.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I fully agree with you on that statement. It's about reprogramming the brain and utilizing what is underdeveloped, because in my case, that I know for a fact that I was not utilizing everything that I available to me.
Absolutely. And so, like, even from a nutrition standpoint, you've probably done research into what kind of nutrition can I add into my system to help my brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All the foods that actually inflame the brain when the brain is already inflamed. So people are eating sort of foods that cause inflammation, which is causing more problems within the brain.
Yeah.
So to eliminate those foods out of your diet, to be able to give your brain that is inflamed a chance to rest and just feed it nourishing foods, and foods that help with the
regeneration.
Yeah, that's a good word, regeneration.
Yes. Yeah. I watched an interview between Dave Asprey and JJ Virgins the other day. I will send it to you, and I'll post it on this question as well. JJ Virgins was a nutritionist, I think, and her son got into a horrific car accident 4 years ago and had traumatic brain injury. And she goes through in the conversation explaining a lot of the nutrition that she did to help her son regenerate his brain and to heal his brain. And her intention from the onset of the accident was that he come out of it better than he was before he went in. And at this point, that's where he's at now, is that he's actually a more like a more wholly developed and a more whole human being than he was before the accident, that literally he was given no survival chance out of the accident. I mean, it was horrific. And it's because of, she was able to add the nutrition to him, because he was like in a coma, he was incapacitated. And so she was literally able to add all this nutrition into his health and healing because of the traumatic nature of the accident and the brain injury, which is what he needed before the brain injury, but he wasn't open to.
Yeah.
And so because of the accident, it allowed her to facilitate, you know, his healing and transformation in a way that she didn't have access to because of his, you know, personality and all sorts of things before the accident. So then I can look at that situation and go, wow, how perfectly orchestrated for her to be who she was as his mother, and to have access and knowledge to what she had access to, and then to be able to facilitate the healing and the transformation and the developmental process that he's gone through as a result of the accident. And that he's asked, you know, what's my purpose? Well, now clearly he's aware of what his purpose is in helping educate and transform people's perception of traumatic brain injury and the brain's ability to heal, especially in regards to energy and nutrition and mindset.
Absolutely. I'd really appreciate having a copy of that so I can watch that, because my journey again, you know, is all about the nutritional side as well. And, you know, the discoveries that I've made on the microbiome of the gut, and how much a powerful player that is in the transformation of the brain and mood disorders and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the connection between the brain and the gut. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So it's just amazing that people who have brain injuries are eating, well, I say in my perception,
yeah,
the incorrect foods, which is just inflaming the brain and causing more problems, rather than looking at the correct diet to nourish that brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey, and I am really grateful for it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, now that you've come out the other side of it, and you've been educated and given the awareness to look at it differently, which is obviously going to be your journey and your gift that you share, is teaching people how to look at their experiences differently, which facilitates the healing process.
Absolutely. And you know, sometimes when you're sort of stuck in the situation and being in that moment of having those concussion side effects, is, you know, you don't even have the comprehension of what am I doing, where am I, and you just have to go through that process. But as you say, once you come out that other side and can put all those pieces together, it's just transformation.
Well, and I think too that's what, you know, is so valuable about like us and who we are and what we're here to do is serving the expansion of awareness of what's possible. And even the concept of the value of working with a coach or working with a facilitator. You know, there's athletes who would never consider not performing with their coaches. And so it's the same thing of, you know, when you're in the middle of it, all of us as coaches and facilitators and consultants, when we're in the middle of it, it's so extremely valuable to have somebody with an outside perspective that can help guide us and lead us through this transformation. I mean, it's so valuable for all of us to know that having, you know, a partner to process things through with is so valuable.
Absolutely. It is valuable, and having been through it, I can appreciate how important it is to have a facilitator or somebody who can work with you to keep you focused and going on that path of self-discovery, self-transformation, all of that.
Well, yeah, because when we're in our own stuff, I mean, it's debilitating to deal with getting ourselves through it. So yeah, for somebody to reach, you know, lend us a hand and help us get through the process. I mean, it's so valuable.
Yeah, it is really invaluable. So I sort of put it out there that if you're going through it, get on board with the facility.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So is there any other questions that you have for me, or I feel like that I've, like anything else that you've dealt with or anything else that you've heard, or yeah, curiosities that you have or anything like that, that I can answer questions.
Well, you know, look, I really appreciate, and thank you so much for clarifying that with concussion for me. That has been an amazing insight for me. Curiosity would be what we discussed before with the weather, especially here in Victoria, where we have, I don't know what it is in Celsius, in Fahrenheit, so I'll have to talk in Celsius. We have 39 one day, the storm will come in, we'll get snow, and the next day it'll be 6-7 degrees. So that vast amount of temperature difference, and then the mood swings of people.
So you were the one that asked about the pressure systems changing, weren't you? Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that I don't know, sometimes it feels like that people don't understand is the purpose of volatility and the purpose of having pressure changes or weather system changes or changes in our mood or experiencing volatility, especially emotional volatility. And it's interesting because people seem to so often have a negative perception of experiencing negative feelings or negative emotions, which is, you know, facilitated by volatility. And so going back to the so my research that I've done is all around integrative consciousness. And so I've created a theory based on integrative consciousness, which is that we can only integrate, and you know, this goes back to breakthrough, it's kind of breakthrough 101, when we're first, you know, taught about we can only integrate to the extent of Planck's dimension or Planck's constant. We can't completely integrate, because if we were to completely integrate, we'd poof into light, there'd be no need for the physical form. So one of the big questions is, how do we continue to integrate on deeper levels? Well, we can only integrate to the inverse correlation that we've experienced polarity. And so it's an oscillating dynamic that we integrate and we polarize, and we integrate and we polarize. And so like, to me, experiencing different forms of pressure or different forms of challenge, it's part of our developmental process. And we can only integrate, which is the same thing as self-love, come to deeper levels of integration or deeper levels of self-love based on the inverse correlation that we've experienced polarity or emotional reaction or emotional trauma. So the purpose of experiencing emotions, which are created by challenge, which are created by trauma, whether it's emotional trauma, physical trauma. So this goes back to, again, the purpose of concussions, the purpose of experiencing accidents, is to experience trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, sexual trauma. It doesn't matter where the trauma comes from. It's to experience polarity, because we can only integrate to the degree that we've allowed ourselves to be polarized. And so people trying to stop growth, to stop discomfort, to stop experiencing trauma, and trauma is just an experience or a reaction and a response in our system to experiencing challenges, which is to experience something that makes us uncomfortable or that creates volatility in our system. It's a necessary part of our developmental process. And so the key is to be self-aware and to be aware of our experience and our, you know, reactions to it, so that when we react emotionally, to be aware, like to self-analyze, which, like so many of us love to do on our self-discovery journey, is to become more self-aware. We have to self-analyze. And so I mean, like, you know, to sit with ourselves or whatever, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And what is it facilitating or helping us, you know, experience or create?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the same conversation that we had with the concussion. What value am I getting out of this? What am I feeling? And then it's like, because we know the DM process, the Demartini method, and we know it's to facilitate self-love. I call it the science of self-love. So it's, you know, what am I feeling? What am I experiencing? And what is it about this that I'm like, that I don't like, or that I'm uncomfortable with? Because all of the things of discomfort, anxiety, all of those feelings that we like try to get rid of, they're facilitating us in our self-love journey. Yeah. Because there's some part of us that we are afraid of exposing to somebody else, or somebody else discovering about us, that of course, if we're afraid of somebody discovering it about us, it's a part of us that we don't like, which is a part that we don't value, which this just, you know, basic side B.
Yeah.
And to facilitate greater levels of self-love, which anything that we love about ourselves, we value about ourselves, facilitates self-worth, and it increases our self-worth, which has an impact on all areas of our life.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes great sense too. And it is all about the volatility, because I've been witnessing, because we've had such amazing weather patterns, the volatility of people that going down with the slump in the barometric pressure, and just looking at all the dynamics of that.
So I used to get, it's interesting when you brought this up, because I used to get what I called weather system headaches. And it was when, the pressure would change. And I'm not somebody who normally gets headaches. And I've done a bunch of research on exploring like what headaches are. And they're a disconnect between the mind and the body, which is obviously creating tension, which is manifesting as a headache. And so where I would get pressure system headaches, it was because there was something that I was doing in my, life or whatever that was incongruent with my values. And so I was challenging my own values, or something in my environment was challenging my values. And so I know that now, looking back on it, that a headache is an incongruency.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned headaches. I was talking with a lady just the other day, and she had migraines. Mm-hmm. And when we went through the method and seeing how her migraines were facilitating how the migraines were facilitating her, she was using them as an escape mechanism.
Sure. Because you drug yourself all up whenever you have a migraine. Yeah.
Absolutely. And she was going into the migraine to escape the reality of her life. And it was a huge wake up for her that she was using that technique and putting herself in so much pain to just numb herself completely from life.
It was a strategy. So I was diagnosed with migraines like 12 years ago, and it was right before I went through my divorce. And I had an ongoing headache for a couple of weeks. It was just like a low grade headache. So I'd started going to the doctor, and this was before I was introduced to the Demartini Institute. It was actually kind of the beginning of my education in the mind-body connection. And so I was going to a therapist at the time, and he would take me through meditations. And so I'd had this headache for a couple of weeks, and he'd been out of town. So when I finally was able to go back and see him, he was like, okay, so let's just do a meditation into the headache and ask it what it wants to say. And so he took me through like this 20-minute meditation down into the headache and said, okay, ask it what it wants to say. And I did. And what I instantly heard was, I hate my life. And it made me start crying as soon as I said that, because like, for all intents and purposes, I was living the American dream. I had everything that you're supposed to like want to be happy. And so when I said, okay, so what does the headache want to say? And it said, I hate my life. I started crying, and I was like, oh my God, it says I hate my life. As soon as I cried, as soon as I verbally acknowledged that that's what it said, the headache dissipated, never came back again. It was the catalyst that led me through my divorce, but that was traumatic for me, even saying that, because my awareness at the time was, I was like, okay, so if I hate my life, then that means I hate everything about my life. And how could that possibly be? How could I like hate my kids and hate my home and hate my job and like everything? Now in hindsight, I can look back knowing what I know and know that I was actually infatuated with my life, believing that because I had created the American dream, that I should be only happy. And I had a lot of misery, and I didn't know why, because I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. So in hindsight, I can look back and go, okay, so that awareness that came out of that headache of I hate my life was the polarity that was repressed because I was infatuated with my life, but my whole system was incongruent because I believed that I was supposed to be happy and never miserable and never sad. And I was so miserable so often, it didn't make sense to me. And so at the time, as soon as I said that, the headache dissolved and it never came back. And so this whole diagnosis with migraines, it's a strategy to escape, which fortunately for me, none of the medications worked on me. So I went to the doctor multiple times. She kept giving me all these different prescriptions and none of them worked. None of them would affect the headache. So I came to the conclusion that my mind was stronger than the medication, and if I wasn't going to allow myself to escape the transformation that I needed to go through. And I knew enough to be like, when the doctor was like, okay, well, you're like a textbook definition, migraine diagnosis. I was like, I'm sorry. No, I don't get migraines. I've never had migraines. You're not going to diagnose me with migraines. And so it was kind of like the defiance in me was like, no, I'm not going to have this. I'm just going to keep asking and keep exploring. I'm not going to just accept that I have migraines. Now knowing that's a perfectly reasonable expectation. And the more you search, the more you find the incongruency, and then you just dissolve it. And so like going to your client or your friend who has the migraines, my brother's had migraines most of his life, my sisters had migraines, my mom's had migraines. And so, for all intents and purposes, hereditarily, it runs in your family, whatever. The only difference was I was like, no, thank you. I'm not taking this. And now knowing it's just a simple incongruency with your values. You're trying to be something that you're not, and you're also living a life that's not a true reflection of who you are. So that's why it led to the divorce that led to the transformation of my entire life and led me to, the journey that I've and understanding. And it led me to so many things, led me to the Demartini Institute. Yeah, so many things. So with the gal that you're working with who has the migraines, it's the same thing. You can keep working on it. And again, I go back to the question to ask is, how does it make you feel? And she'll come up with something that it's making her feel. You can identify the trait, and that trait, I will guarantee you, is a part of her she's not loving.
Yeah.
So that's where the Demartini method comes in, is you just find that trait, and then you can actually dissolve the symptoms that are showing up in the form of a migraine. And she no longer has to use that strategy anymore, because she can transform it into a new strategy that she gets the same outcome.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like the addiction process.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly it is. She's addicted to her headaches.
Because it's a strategy that's getting her the outcome that's facilitating her values, but opening up the awareness that you can actually use a different strategy to get the same outcome. Another gal that I was working with had eczema spots, and she had one really bad on her neck and one really bad on her eyelid. And when I asked her, how does it make you feel? She said, she started to cry, and she said, it makes me feel gross and disgusting. And so that was the trait, gross and disgusting. So who sees you as gross and disgusting? Well, when I first asked that question, then she got defensive. And then she was like, what do you mean who sees me as gross and disgusting? I don't know who sees me that way. And so I kind of calmly explained the process and explained what we were going to do and the outcome we were going to create. And then she understood that people see her as gross and disgusting regardless of what it's just simply a reflection of who she is. So like, as an example, she eats meat. All vegans, all vegetarians would see her as gross and disgusting because she eats meat. It doesn't mean she's wrong or bad. It just means other people are seeing her as gross and disgusting. So she's not escaping being seen as gross and disgusting. So she no longer has to have the eczema that makes her feel gross and disgusting, because it's already showing up in her reality. And so then like she swears like a drunken sailor. There's tons of people, tons of women stereotypically that would see her as gross and disgusting for having such a potty mouth, for swearing so much. So we just went through like all of her normal, healthy behaviors that she does as an expression of who she is, that some demographic of people would see as gross and disgusting. Within 24 hours, the swelling, the inflammation had gone down, and by the time she'd completely finished the process, it was completely gone, completely healed, no redness, no scar, no pinkness, nothing. And so, yeah, absolutely the same thing with the migraine. She didn't, I mean, you know, she was co-creating this experience of having something that made her feel gross and disgusting because she didn't think that it was valuable, which nobody thinks it's valuable, to be gross and disgusting, or especially to feel gross and disgusting. But part of our journey of enlightenment, which that's the journey of life, is everybody's on a journey of enlightenment, because that's all for us to become lighter, brighter stars, just like we're facilitating the earth and becoming a star. So part of our enlightenment journey is to experience every emotion, every feeling, every sin that any human being could ever experience. That's what facilitates Christ consciousness. Theoretically, Christ was the greatest healer of all time. How did he become and attain that level of healing consciousness? It's a heightened level of integration, which is a heightened level of self-love, which is what allowed him to facilitate love and healing with other people. So it's like all linked, it's all connected, it's all part of our process of development.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's healing on all levels.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, if love is the greatest healing force there is, which theoretically it is, then how do we obtain that level of love consciousness or healing consciousness to allow us to not only heal ourselves, but to facilitate healing in others as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
and
an
I think
integration
sometimes
process.
we actually get stuck in our humanness and not appreciate how valuable we are to the whole experience universally, and look
To the evolution of human consciousness, exactly. Yep, we're all participating in our own unique way in the evolution of human consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate that. And
thank you.
Enlightened me on many levels. So go forth, I say.
Thank you. You know, it's